everyone, I'm Ebony Love of LoveBug Studios. Today's video is one that I've been waiting for a very long time, probably about, when did we start the cut along? I guess it's been about 8 weeks now, so I've been waiting 2 whole months to get to this video so that I can show you how to use the Studio, should actually pull the die out, so that I can show you how to use the Studio die pennant number 4 to cut 1,000 pyramids. The project that I've selected to cut with this die is a Christmas quilt. Way back when I started selecting and buying fabric and really getting into being a quilter, I would buy any fabric that would sit still long enough to jump into my cart. And a lot of that happened to be holiday fabrics because those were usually on sale. So I have just a ton of Christmas fabric, and I added it all up, and it's 41 yards. So I promised that this fabric would not sit on my shelf just another year. So I'm going to cut all of this fabric up into these pyramid shapes, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. When you're working with yardage, one of the first things that you need to do is prepare your yardage for cutting. And so I've just pulled off one of the yards that I had, and I always press the fabric and make sure that I press out the factory fold because the fabric is rarely folded on grain. Now, I have done a video to show you how to straighten fabric along the grain, but I wanted to just show you that real quickly again here, and also show you how I cut all this fabric down into strips. To straighten the fabric, I'm going to hold the fabric up by the selvages, and I'm going to show this so that you can see this off grain. So you can probably see the wrinkle that has developed in this fabric. So I'm just going to use my fingers to move the selvage along, and I want to make sure the selvages are straight, and I just move one of either the front or the back of the fabric until that wrinkle disappears. And so that's how I know that this fabric is now on grain. And then once I have that, then I can lay this fabric down. And I'll fold it in half again. And again, making sure that any wrinkles or puckers are out. So that's how I straighten the yardage. We'll get to cutting in a second, but first I need to show you the die itself. This is one of the largest triangles that I have been able to find among the existing dies. This die is so large, in fact, that it's hard for me to show you the whole thing on the video, but you can see that I have marked this die, I have drawn a perimeter, and this is very similar to the Isosceles triangle die that I showed you in the very beginning of the series. I have also measured that perimeter, and you can see I have marked the size here directly on the foam above the die that I need a 9.5 inch tall strip, and then this is 8 inches wide. So that's going to tell me the best use of my fabric. So I did decide to cut 9.5 inch strips, and 8 inches is going to go across the width of the fabric. So most fabric is marked as 43 or 44 inches. Most patterns use 42 inches as the usable width, and 8 goes into 45 times. So I'm going to get 5 triangles at least across the width of fabric, and when we cut these you'll see whether or not that holds true. When I'm cutting, one of the things that I use is called a Shape Cut Plus. This is a June Taylor ruler. It's kind of hard to see because it is clear and flexible, but hopefully you're seeing the reflection on the screen. This has different slots in it, and I'll show you when we lay this down on the mat what this looks like. But I love this because it is 12 inches tall and it is 18 inches wide. So this is going to let me cut up to a half yard of fabric at one time into different strips. The slots are every 1/2 inch, which is a very convenient size for a lot of the things that I cut. So to cut this fabric, what I do is I make sure that I have folded this fabric on grain. Again, I've pressed this, I've straightened it along the selvage, or excuse me, along the grain. And with my shape cut ruler, what I do is I align the lower number, so there's a lower line down along the bottom, and I'm going to align that with the fold along the bottom of my fabric. And then the first slot, this is the first slot, I'm going to align that so that it is going to give me a complete cut on the side. And when I do this, when I make this first cut, I'll show you what comes off. There's a wide slot down at the bottom where my rotary cutter fits in, so I just slide that into the slot, hold the ruler straight, and make a cut. So this is the first piece that comes off. This is what's left after straightening the fabric. I tend to keep these to tie up little fabric packages or quilty gifts that I give people. So these don't go most of the time. If they're big enough, I'll keep them. If they're a little bit narrower, then I will put them in my dog bed scrap pile. The first cut that I will make is at the 9.5 inches, which is what I measured on the die, and make that cut. So that's my first strip. And then I'll keep doing this. Now, because this ruler is only 18 inches long and I'm cutting 9.5 inch strips, I won't be able to make 2 full cuts. But most of the time I'm able to get at least 2 cuts on this. But all you have to do is just keep moving the fabric, aligning the bottom, and making the cut. So this makes cutting strips very fast. A lot of people ask, well, why don't you just, if you're going to cut strips, why don't you just use the rotary cutter if you're cutting strips on a regular basis? And this tool is very nice for cutting the larger strips where I don't have a die available. To do that, for example, there is not a 9.5 inch die. And it's great for just little things that I don't need full dies for. So the cuts that I'm making now are, I am processing the scraps from this yardage right now. And so what I've done is I knew that I didn't have another full cut. So I have cut 2.5 inch wide strips, and this is going to make a great scrappy binding for my Christmas quilt. And then this last piece is a 2-inch strip, and that will go in my 2-inch strip bin. And then this last piece, this is pretty narrow, so this will probably go into my dog bed scraps. I also processed some other strips earlier, so I did the same thing where I've got some binding strips. I've got the strips for wrapping quilty packages. And then I've got the strips that came off of the yardage. I have another piece here that I wanted to talk to you a little bit about. So this fabric, this particular Christmas fabric, had a really great looking selvage. And this selvage, it just was, I love the little dots, and it just looks so pretty and festive. So knowing that I was going to get at least 5 triangles across my 42-inch width of fabric, I felt comfortable cutting this off because 8 times 5 is 40, and so technically I should have about 2 inches left over. So I felt comfortable taking off the selvages from this piece of fabric before cutting it. And then I did the same thing. I ended up with 2.5 inch strips and a 2-inch strip that's going to go into my scrap bin, and then lots of other pieces for tying up quilty packages. And the reason I have so many is that this particular piece was a 2-inch, it was a 2-yard piece of fabric, and sometimes when you're cutting with the shape cut ruler, you need to re-straighten the end. So if you make a number of cuts, it's always good to sort of re-straighten the edge of your fabric so that you continue cutting straight strips. So I think it's time to start cutting. So I want to show you how we're going to use this die. Let me move all of my scraps out of the way so we can get this on the video.